Hey, everybody. Welcome to Resistance Live for the 14th of November. You're getting me completely makeup free today. I warned you all that this was going to happen. The reason why we are broadcasting so early is that I am on my way into Los Angeles for a photo shoot. I have to show up with no makeup on my face at all. So those of you who have been with me from the very beginning know that we did this a couple of times before during the Kavanaugh hearings when I was like crying in front of my television set. So I'm used to all of this, kind of like thing. And I will just tell you that the interesting thing about this photo shoot that I'm heading in to do today is that it's all about kind of like self-acceptance. So, what's more self-accepting than being completely unmade up as a 48-year-old woman on a live stream? So there you go. Anyway, we're here. I wanted to drop in really quickly before I head off to this like all day event today to give you guys a few more takeaways from yesterday's testimony. We're heading to Yovanovitch tomorrow, reminder. So it's going to be a really big, dramatic day tomorrow. Again, I just want to say to all of you, I'm going to rearrange perhaps the time of the broadcast depending on where we are on testimony, because my expectation is that tomorrow's testimony is going to be one of the bigger moments of impeachment, as if yesterday wasn't big enough. So one of the things that I just want to say to all of you about yesterday is please don't take this party line that is now being parroted by certain members of the media that yesterday was like boring and all that matters is whether or not it's dramatic enough to heart. I referenced this a little bit yesterday in terms of Republican talking points, but we had an NBC News story break overnight that said impeachment didn't have enough pizzazz. Like, I just want to remind you all, the issue here is whether or not the president has committed crimes, not whether or not it's a reality television show that, sort of like is here to entertain us, right? There's a lot of uproar in the media and elsewhere this morning about that particular piece, and justifiably so. So, one of the things that I do want to make really clear is that yesterday's hearing, by the time I went live, was already damning, and by the end of the day was worse for the president. We saw quite significant testimony out of both Ambassador Taylor and out of George Kent about the nature of the president's pressure, the fact that he did not care about the lives that were being lost in Ukraine, the potential threat to the security of the entire European Union by Putin's incursion into Ukraine, being left defenseless because of a lack of U.S. aid. And the most relevant part, in my view, from yesterday still remains that moment where we learned for the first time from Ambassador Taylor that his aide had overheard a conversation between Sondland and the president, where the president asked about the quote unquote investigations into the Bidens, and then went further to reflect that Sondland had said that the only thing the president cared about was the investigations. He didn't care about Ukraine or its security or any of the implications of not providing aid at all. So that moment in and of itself, by the way, I just want to make this all very clear, is a total abuse of power. The testimony is admissible. There is a hearsay component to the aide's testimony, but we're going to hear from that aide in closed session on Friday and probably in a public hearing thereafter. And that, again, will be the one thing I want to make clear to all of you is that when the federal rules of evidence apply in a Senate trial, anything that's hearsay is also going to be subject to hearsay exceptions. So arguably, the president saying something like, what's the status of the investigations in the context of a conversation about aid is a statement against interest. And those of you who have watched for a very long time know that one of the hearsay exceptions is statement against interest, that, it is admissible against a party opponent if it is a statement against that person's criminal or liability-based interest. And so it's kind of an admission of liability on the president's part. There's an argument to be made there that it should be admissible. And there's other things that, by the way, should make it admissible as well. We still don't even know the scope of what Taylor had in his notes, for instance. Those are contemporaneous recorded recollections, which can be used to refresh his memory in the event of a trial. So the whole hearsay thing, I just want to make this clear because this is another Republican talking point, doesn't hold any water. Direct testimony from witnesses of their own experiences is not hearsay. If they're reporting on what someone else said, it arguably could be hearsay, but we're going to hear from a lot of the people who allegedly said all these things in the next few days. Gordon Sondland is testifying next week. He's going to testify about his conversations with the president. So that gets us to another Republican talking point that's come up overnight. Jim Jordan has been ranting about this morning. The fact that they're now leaning into this idea that the president didn't touch any of this, that none of these people have met the president. Obviously not going to be true for Gordon Sondland, not going to be true for Vindman, who was in the room with the president on a number of occasions that are significant to this timeline. And there are going to be a series of witness statements and testimony about conversations directly with the president about this sort of stuff. So they're only going to be able to ride that train for so long. So let me just give you the kind of like overarching picture of where I think the Republican Party is right now. There's two different camps. One camp is like the insane Fox News camp. Like there were people on Fox News last night who literally were claiming that George Soros owns the State Department, the FBI, and the Department of Justice. I have to say, like, this is a sign of how far the propaganda has gone. There's probably some people in the country who actually believe that. Let's just be clear about it. Like, it's logically impossible for anyone to own the Department of State, let alone when we have 30 or 40 year long public servants who have served through Democrats and Republicans, much like the people that we saw testify yesterday. Those people are not bought and owned. Agents who have been in the DOJ for 30 years are not bought and owned. They may have their own biases, but they're certainly not owned by George Soros. The Department of Justice is under crazy, insane control of Bill Barr right now, but it's not owned by anybody. So the wild thing about all of this is that we're in a position now where there's the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that's on national television, speaking to a third of the country or something like that. And then over on the other side, we've got the Republicans on the Hill who are trying to come up with a rational explanation for the president's conduct that they think is going to hold weight either in the court of public opinion or in a court of law. In both instances, the Republican Party is failing miserably right now, just utterly failing. The thing about the statements that are coming out of the GOP right now that I want to make very clear to you is that, the stuff about Hunter Biden, I mean, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Hunter Biden's not going to be a witness in a Senate impeachment trial of the president, because it's not about what Hunter Biden did. It's about whether or not the president extorted a country for interference in an election. And so the only witnesses within that scope of relevancy, and I'll remind you all that there are relevancy standards in the federal rules of evidence. Things have to be relevant to the cause of action at hand in order to be admissible in a court of law or arguably an impeachment trial, assuming the federal rules of evidence apply there, which they do. So the scope of what the GOP is doing is not going to hold water once we're in an actual Senate impeachment trial, or for that matter, in a criminal court of law. So the only thing that they're trying to do right now is to influence public opinion. And they're doing that, ding, 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 because they're worried about the amount of blowback that they're already getting from the public concerning impeachment. We have not seen any polls yet out of what happened yesterday, but I can basically guarantee you that the polls for the president's removal are going to go up based on what we saw yesterday. And they're only going to go up from here after Yovanovitch and wait till we get to Vindman and Fiona Hill. So the space that we're in right now from the scope of where we find ourselves is that the Republicans, again, I want to make this very clear, do not have a leg to stand on. They don't have a leg to stand on. There's literally, I said this yesterday on the broadcast, it only became more true throughout the day yesterday. There's no viable defense to this. There's no viable legal defense to what the president has done. It's an open and shut case. And most trial lawyers, I mean, everyone that I know, I certainly feel this way, would go to court with this case in a hot second. It's that open and shut, right? You've got multiple witnesses testifying about the fact that the thing is as it seems. And I'll mention one other thing here from the standpoint of this, it's not a quid pro quo argument, which is still circulating around yesterday. Reminder, we don't need a quid pro quo to impeach the president. We don't need a quid pro quo for it to be a crime. But I'm going to introduce to you another little Latin phrase out of the law, which is the phrase res ipsa loquitur. What it means as a term of art in the law is the thing is as it seems. And this is the principle, by the way, those of you who've been watching for 3 years, remember that I've done a lot of these sort of law school classroom style teachings on circumstantial evidence, that you can convict people based on circumstantial evidence, not direct evidence, not I saw him stab that man, but he claimed that he was going to kill that man. The guy is dead. And I saw him with a knife headed to the guy's house. Right? That's circumstantial evidence, right? Res ipsa loquitur is the principle that the thing is as it seems. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So the thing about the way the evidence is shaking out around this already is that we have multiple witnesses now, like nearly a dozen, saying that the president's shadow foreign policy in Ukraine, and really the only policy that he cared about, was getting Ukraine to investigate the Biden so that he could interfere in the 2016 election. And he was willing to withhold security and aid from Ukraine and jeopardize fundamentally the stability of the entire region and the entire EU to get it. And the fact that there may be no, like, the president saying, you do this or else, because, that's not how mob bosses operate. I'll just remind you all. They don't say to the people they're victimizing, like, do this or I'm going to kill you. They say it would be a good idea if you want to keep us happy to do this, right? Which is more like, but I have a favor to ask you. Look, the point here is that we only need significant circumstantial evidence to convict in a court of law. Now, that doesn't mean the Senate Republicans are going to head in that direction, but the behavior out of people like Jim Jordan and Lindsey Graham right now shows us how scared they are, how significantly they recognize they're in jeopardy, and very clearly that they have grasped that there's no real legitimate defense. So one of you asked this morning, like, what does this mean for our ongoing resistance efforts? Well, I'm going to say to you the same thing that I've been saying to you for several weeks now, which is this. You got to call the moderate senators. There are indications right now, I had some text messages last night with a couple of colleagues who know people on the Hill. There are some indications right now that honestly, like, the GOP bloc will break at some point with the right pressure points upon it. Yesterday was really, really, really bad for them. We know that Mitt Romney would not sign on to the resolution. We know that condemning the House impeachment investigation. Collins and Murkowski did not either. My sense about this is that if Romney stepped forward and said, I'm in favor of impeachment and removal, that will sway some people. Murkowski doing it will sway some people. Susan Collins, I put no water in. We know this. There are indications right now that there are some other rumblings behind the scenes here. And we've had a number of questions the last couple of days about the secret ballot idea. There's never been a secret ballot vote, let alone on something as significant for national and international security as an impeachment vote, ever. There are arguable procedural mechanisms by which that vote could be made secret, but do I think that's going to happen? No. And I honestly don't think that's very good for our democracy. I mean, I'm in favor of removing him any way that he can be removed, but the American public have a right to know who's actually backing this president and who isn't. And from the state of where we find ourselves, what we really need to happen in an ideal situation is for enough pressure to be put on moderate Republican senators that the wall cracks. And the only people who are left standing by the president are people like Lindsey Graham and, those who are for whatever reason compromised by this president. I think it's possible. I think it's more possible with every passing day. I will remind you all that there is a difference between the front that is being put out by the GOP on places like Fox News and elsewhere and what's really going on behind the scenes. And we had some reporting about that even yesterday that, all the senators who were like, I'm too busy to watch this, were secretly in their offices watching it nonstop on TV like the rest of us. Again, I'm just going to reiterate, your best pressure points right now are moderate senators. The House is going to impeach him. There's basically no chance in hell right now that that's not going to happen. The place that's going to really matter for whether or not the president is going to be removed, let alone resign, because I will remind you all that pressure is going to have to come from inside his own party. The place where the pressure needs to be levied right now is in the Senate and on moderate Republicans in the Senate, particularly those of you who have moderate Republicans representing you in the Senate. But all of us can make those calls, and we should, in the hopes of, getting a result here that is good for democracy and good for the country. All right. We did have a couple of big dramatic moments yesterday that I just want to point to. Obviously, Representative Welch saying that, the person who started this all, the president, is welcome to come sit here and testify, was a great moment. And, certainly a moment of humor. Is the president likely to testify in front of the House? No. We are all of the White House representatives have defied subpoenas already. He's certainly not going to show up. I also just want to point out that Representative Joaquin Castro, who I adore and who I know personally, did some really great things yesterday on the issue of attempt, because the Republicans were trying to say at one point, this isn't an impeachable offense because the aid was released. released. You know, they didn't mention, of course, that the aid was released because the president found out about the whistleblower complaint. But one of the things that is really key here to the understanding of where we find ourselves is that, like, attempted murder is a crime, attempted bribery is a crime, attempted extortion is a crime. And the line of argument that was pursued there by Joaquin Castro was very effective at pointing out that, you know, for where we find ourselves right now, we have to recognize that, you know, the law is the law, right? Like, you can't, John Gotti isn't any less guilty for, like, threatening to kill someone for not paying, you know, their share to the mob than he is for actually killing that person, right? And I'll just let you all know, in some cases, attempt statutes have the exact same sentencing requirements for the actual crime itself. It depends on the nature of the crime, but, you know, like, you go to prison for attempt. So again, you know, that was a really key moment in my view. And, you know, I think that we have to remember that there's been a lot of preparation that's happened behind the scenes here. Dan Goldman, by the way, as counsel for the majority on the House Intelligence Committee, did a great job yesterday. I said it yesterday. It was true all the way through. His questions were precise. They were exactly what you would expect to see from a trial lawyer examining a witness. They know what they're doing. And the Democrats, by the way, have also apparently been doing a lot of preparation behind the scenes for the potential interruption of testimony by difficult, interrupting, obstreperous Republican reps. So the way that hearing was handled yesterday by Adam Schiff and with Dan Goldman's assistance was very well done. So I left that all feeling quite confident about where we find ourselves right now. It was obviously like a scathingly bad day for the president. And, you know, I think that from the place where we find ourselves right now, we've got to continue making our voices heard. Tomorrow is going to be like a banner day. I'm just going to say that. Like, you know, the ambassador that Trump fired because she got in the way of his extortion plans, who George Kent in particular went to bat for yesterday. It's going to be an interesting moment. Okay, one final word to those of you who are worried about what's going to happen with with Sondland next week. So there are a couple of you who have remarked, like, how do we know he's not going to lie? So one of the things that you all need to be conscious of is that there are ways to deal with lying witnesses in court, right? One of the things that happens in an environment where you are taking direct testimony from a witness and that witness is hostile is that you are able to ask the judge, this is in a courtroom, but, you know, the same principles are going to apply in a hearing. You're able to ask the judge to treat the witness as hostile, in which case you can ask them leading questions. There are no limitations, by the way, in a House hearing on whether a question is leading or not. Those similar sorts of trial procedure and evidence rules do not apply in a hearing before the House. But all that said, the skill set is very much the same. And you can bet your bottom dollar that if Sondland tries to hedge on his testimony, especially given that he's changed his testimony once already right now, he's clearly in fear of going to jail for perjury on behalf of this president. Goldman is going to go at him hard. He's going to go at him with all the other testimony that exists from all the other witnesses, with his own prior testimony, with the fact that he changed his testimony already. And Sondland's going to look like crap if that's the way that this goes down. So I am not expecting, honestly, given the pattern of what we've seen already from Sondland, that he's going to lie. Because he knows that if he lies, and there are 3 other witnesses backing him up, and there's probably, by the way, documents and other evidence that we don't know about yet that backs all of this up, that may already be in the hands of the Intelligence Committee, that could send him to jail, he would be profoundly foolish to do this, especially in light of one last bit of breaking news that happened this morning right before I went on the air, which is that the Roger Stone trial is deliberating this morning on whether or not Roger Stone should go to prison for lying to Congress. I am assuming that we are going to have a verdict on that very soon, and because it's not a hard case. And, you know, if Roger Stone goes to prison for lying to Congress, you can bet your bottom dollar that a lot of these witnesses are going to start rethinking anything that they might say, including "I don't know" or "I don't recall," in the event that there's other evidence out there that backs up the fact that they knew exactly what was going on in this instance. So we're in good shape. And I will be here tomorrow. I'm going to remind you all again that tomorrow, depending on how Yovanovitch's testimony goes, we will be going either live at regular time, or we may be going live a little bit later. I want to make sure I'm there to give you guys like up to the minute analysis and that we're not missing anything profoundly significant while we're on the air. So just stay tuned to the Patreon feed, and I'll let you all know when I'm going to go live. But that's it. You know, I felt pretty good coming out of yesterday. I hope you all did too. All right, I'm going to go off to my photo shoot. I will talk to all of you tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thank you all so much. And make your phone calls today, please, to moderate senators, including, by the way, he's not a moderate, but call Mitch McConnell because he needs to hear from us too. All right. Much love to all of you. Bye.